And a very good morning, afternoon, depending on which time zone you happen to be in. Welcome to the Sports Wagering Zone. We're coming to you live on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Also podcasting on most of your major podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Spreaker, or even on Google Podcasts as well. You can get us just about on any major podcast platform that is available. I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you very much for listening. Got a lot to talk about today. The NBA is finally gone and done. It's in the rear window right now. So we'll look at that right now. Is going to be baseball over the next few days. And of course, we're still going to be looking into some NFL action if there's anything that we need to talk about, because like we said yesterday, we're less than 2 months away from starting the NFL season. So anyway, I want to thank you very much for listening once again. And, depending on what time zone you're in, it may be just starting out your day, or maybe you're halfway through the day, or maybe you're listening to a podcast later on in the day. Either way, once again, we really appreciate you listening to the show. We were gone for about 3 weeks, primarily because I had to move my family from Charlotte, North Carolina to Colorado. I know that the promo in the beginning says that we're in Charlotte, but we're not. We're working on making the changes in that. A lot of things have to be changed and going on. Things will be kind of a little kind of rustic here and there, maybe a little upheaval here and there. For you guys that have been listening for many weeks or months, you kind of get an idea that, hey, things are a little different right now, but we'll get back to normal. It won't be long. Anyway, as usual, we're going to talk about baseball today. We've got 3 games on tap. By that, I mean, for you new listeners, the fact that we are following how this line movement is going in the various sports. Right now it's baseball. And of course, by following that line movement, we see which direction the pros, the professional bettors, are betting. Today's 3 games are the Mets against the Reds, the Twins against the White Sox, and the Cubs against the Cardinals. We're going to take a close look at all 3 games, kind of give you an idea as to some pros and cons on which team to bet on. We're going to let you know how the pros are going. But of course, as always, the primary purpose of the show, let you make the final decision. And we're also going to go over some data that we've accumulated over the past couple of weeks that we want to kind of share with you as well. But as usual, let's get back to and talk about what happened yesterday as far as betting was concerned. In the NBA, as everybody knows by now, the Bucks beat the Suns 105-98. They won the finals. They were 4-2 in their wins. They won their last 4 games of the series. They were 0-2 going into this, wound up winning the next 4 games. The Bucks also covered after they closed as 4.5-point home favorites yesterday, and also the total stayed under the 220.5. In the meantime, the favorites and the home teams in this series, they went 5-1 straight up, and also 5-1 against the spread in this final round. Overall, the favorites finished 54-30 straight up and 49-34 against the spread, which put them at 59%. So if you bet only the favorites throughout the entire basketball season, you probably be ahead by some degree anyway, because you're at 59% as a win percentage. Now the home teams are 48-37 straight up, 45-39 against the spread as far as the playoffs were concerned, and that's at 53.5%. As far as the over-unders are concerned, they split 3-3 in the final round, and totally for the season, the unders finished 42-41. That's not for the season, but for the entire playoff series this year, 42-41. Very close, but the unders were on top just by 1 game. So that's the story with the NBA. Like I said, it's done with, it's gone. Now we can turn our attention to baseball. Meanwhile, yesterday in baseball, the Dodgers were a minus 140 on the money line. They beat the Giants 8-6. They won it by Will Smith's 3-run home run, which was a walk-off home run in the bottom of the ninth inning of that game. Meanwhile, the Major League Baseball favorites were 7-5 yesterday, with Miami against Washington and Pittsburgh against Arizona closing as a pick'em. And once again, I just want to remind you that when we talk about numbers, odds, pick'ems, or whatever, it's Las Vegas numbers. So they may be slightly different where you're betting. So this Miami-Washington game or the Pittsburgh-Arizona game might not have been a pick'em in your particular area. They were, however, in Vegas. The favorites lead right now 802 to 572, which is over 58% in baseball. Now, the overs went 7-6-1 yesterday. And, of course, there was a push on that Miami-Washington game, which was set at 9. Now, of course, the overs still lead 695 to 668, which is 51%. So that's a roundup of what happened yesterday in Major League Baseball, as well as what happened in the NBA as well. And generally speaking, now that we're kind of getting back into our old routine, that's the way we usually start out most of our shows, by telling you what happened the day before. So we're going to take a break. And like I said, we take 3 breaks within the show. Each one is of a 1-minute duration. But before we take that break, I just want to say one thing. I got some emails, and one of the emails I got had to do with horse racing. Before we went on our 3-week hiatus, we talked about some legislation that was passed in the state of New Jersey as far as betting was concerned. And what they're doing is they're going to make it available to you if you're going to bet on any horse racing in the state of New Jersey. You can not only bet the pari-mutuel numbers, but you can also take a number that is going to be made available and keep it throughout. What I mean by that is this. Right now, if you went to any other racetrack, or even right now in New Jersey, you go to make a bet, the numbers change. They may start out, say, 5-1, may drop to 4-1, may drop to 7-2, or whatever. In the meantime, you're waiting to make your bet. When you're looking at it, it might be 5-1. You say, oh, this looks pretty good to me. At 5-1, I think I'll make a bet on it. And then as the day gets closer and closer to post time, the numbers start dropping. Well, whatever that number drops down to, that's the new number that you're going to be paid at if you happen to win. However, the European way of doing it, which is like England and Australia primarily, is they have bookies that actually work at the track, and they give you a line, they give you a number, and that's your number regardless of what happens, whether it goes up or whether it goes down. You're going to be paid off on that particular number if you happen to win. So if you go into a bookmaker and he tells you it's 5-1, even though it may go to 6 or 7-1, or if it drops down to 9-5 or 2-1, 3-1, whatever, you're in at that original number. So that's the legislation that was passed in New Jersey. That's going to start there. And the way we kind of feel about it, before long, wherever horse racing is legal in the United States, most of those states will probably change over to that as well. That's a real good benefit if you're betting on horses. I know I grew up in the New York metropolitan area. Those of you that listened to the show in the past, you know I owned the racehorse. I was very well involved in betting on racing. I used to go every day and things of that nature. And I would see how the numbers would change. You'd see a horse that you liked really well was at 6-1 or 7-1 or 5-1, but before it went to post, it dropped down to maybe 4.5-1 or 3-1 or somewhere in that area. So by getting an actual number set, it may be of great benefit to you if you're going to be betting in that direction. So, kind of want to answer that email, get that all straightened out, and give you an idea. If you have any questions on it, by all means, just send us an email. Send it to the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. Be happy to answer any questions that you have. So, let's get that first break out of the way. And just a reminder, you'll be back in the Sports Wagering Zone in 1 minute. And welcome back. Welcome back to the Sports Wagering Zone. I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you very much for listening. We're coming to you live on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as podcasting on most of your major podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. We're on most of the major podcast platforms. So let's get down to baseball, because you know what? Right now, the NBA Finals are over. Baseball takes center stage. That's before we get to the football season, which is kind of less than 2 months away. So we have some games on tap for today. So let's talk about and see where the money is flowing on these games in major leagues today. The early game at 12:35 p.m. Eastern Time. The New York Mets against the Cincinnati Reds going to be starting shortly. Okay. These are non-division teams. They split the first two games of the series. The Mets won the opener 15-11. They were plus 105 dogs on the road. Then the Reds came back with that 4-3 win. They were 145 favorites at home. Now, that's on the money line. In today's early game, it's the rubber match. The Mets come out with Marcus Stroman. He's 6-8 with a 2.79 ERA. And the Reds come back with their right-hander, Jeff Hoffman, 3-4 with a 4.61 ERA. Now, as we look at the line in this game, it opened with the Mets listed as a minus 120 road favorite, and the Reds as a plus 110 home dog. The pros, they have really come in on the Mets, laying that short chalk price and steamed that number up from minus 120 up to 135 on the money line. Now, non-division favorites, keep this in mind. When they have a 10-cent move of steam or more so far this season, they're over 60%. Almost 63%. The Mets are 40-26 against right-handed pitchers this year. The Reds are 38-39 against right-handed pitchers. Now, New York is 32-22 as a favorite. Cincinnati is 20-23 as an underdog. So we could also be looking at a really high-scoring game in this situation as well, because the total, it opened at 10.5, and the over is being juiced up to minus 120 on the money line. What that means is that you might possibly see it go up to 11 runs as well. The over is 27-20 at the Great American Ballpark, which is the Reds' home stadium, and the forecast calls for temperatures in the low 80s, 5 to 10 mile per hour winds, and they're going to be blowing out to right center. That's why the number is so high. So in that game, The pros are on the Mets. It should be starting within 15 minutes or so from now. Now, the other games at 8:10 tonight, you got the Minnesota Twins and the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox, they took two of the first three games in this series, including that 9-5 come from behind win last night, where they were minus 135 on the money line as the home favorites. But in tonight's game, which is the final game in the series, by the way, the Twins come in with Michael Pineda. He's 3-5 with a 4.11 ERA, and the White Sox come out with their right-hander, Dylan Cease. He's 7-5 with a 4.15 ERA. Now, as we look at the line in this game, it opened with Chicago listed as a minus 130 home favorite and Minnesota as a plus 120 road dog. Now, in this particular game, the professionals and the general public, everybody seems to be on the Chicago White Sox. So what happens? It drives the total up to minus 140 on the money line, going way up. The home favorites off of a win have gone almost 62% this season. So if you have a home favorite who won the day before or the game before, doesn't have to be the day before, it could have been a break day there, okay? But if they won their last game, they've been winning at almost 62% this season coming into this next game. So Chicago's 32-13, they're 71% as a home favorite. So if you'd been betting the White Sox at home, you'd probably be ahead at this point in time. Again, depending what the numbers were whenever they came in or whenever they lost, because the money line actually has a lot to dictate as to how well you're doing financially. Chicago is 50-22 as a favorite overall so far this season. Minnesota is 13-24 as the road dog. So the White Sox are 35-16 at home. The Twins, they're 18-30 when they're on the road. And the White Sox have owned the Twins so far this season. They've played 15 times. White Sox won 12 times, lost 3 times overall. So there looks to be some liability here for a higher scoring game as well. The total in this game started out at 9, with the over being juiced up to 115, which means there's a good possibility it may go to 9.5 to 10. Now, Minnesota has been one of the best over teams so far this season. So these are things you have to look for. Here's a team that's not doing too well on the road. And yet when it comes to being in games that are over, they're 56-34 so far this season, which means that the teams that they're playing are really pouring on the runs in these situations. So in this game, the pros are on the Chicago White Sox as well as the general public as well. So every now and then you're going to see where the general public and the pros all come in under the same banner. So we have one more game on tap. That's the Cubs against the Cardinals. We're going to take our second break, and when we come back, that's a game we're going to talk about in more detail like we just did. And if you're interested in that Mets game, it's going to be starting soon. So if you're listening to the show live, okay, the pros are on the Mets in this particular game. So it kind of lets you know what that is as going in. So let's take that second break. And like I said, every break is of a minute duration. If that's the case, we'll be back into the sports wagering zone right after this message. And welcome back. Welcome back to the Sports Wagering Zone. I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you very much for listening. We're coming to you live from the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as podcasting on most of your major podcast platforms. We're also on Blackjack TV out there in the East Coast and at milehighradio.com as well. Anyway, let's give you a quick recap because the Mets game is going to be starting at 12:35 Eastern Time. Mets against the Cincinnati Reds, and in this particular game, the pros are on the New York Mets. Just to let you know what direction that's going. Also at 8 o'clock tonight, you got the Twins against the White Sox, and in that particular game, not only the pros but also the general public. They're all on the White Sox. They're the flavor of the month, as they say. Everybody is trying to get on board that fast-moving train. Meanwhile, also around 8 o'clock tonight, you got that other team in Chicago, the Chicago Cubs, playing the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cubs are 47-48. And the St. Louis Cardinals are 47-48 as well. Now, these are National League Central teams, and they're about as even as it gets, as you could tell from their records. They have identical one-loss records, and two teams have split the first two games in this series, so it's right down the middle. Cardinals took the opener 8-3. They were plus 105 home dogs in that game. And then the Cubs came back for 6 runs in the ninth inning to beat the Cardinals 77-6 last night as plus 100 road dogs on the money line. So in tonight's primetime game, the Cubs give the ball to Kylie Hendricks, 12-4, 3.65 ERA. And the Cardinals come back with their veteran right-hander, Adam Wainwright. He's 7-6 this season with a 3.71 ERA. Now, as we look at the line in this game, it opened as just about a pick-em because both sides were about minus 105 on the money line. Now, the pros, they've gone along with the home team because we've seen St. Louis move to minus 115 as a home favorite, moved up from a minus 105 to a minus 115. Now, the short home favorites, these are teams that are at home, they're favorites, but they're less than 140, minus 140 on the money line, or 230 to 173 so far this season. Once again, a home favorite, okay, a short home favorite. 115 is short. That's a minus 140 or less, okay, are at almost 58% so far this season. The Cardinals are 25-17 whenever they're a favorite. The Cubs, well, they're just 16-28 when they're a dog. Now, St. Louis is 26-20 at home. The Cubs are 19-31 when they're on the road. Now, the pros seem to be leaning on the under in this game as well. The total in this game is at 8, with the under being juiced. The other two games we saw the overs being juiced up, the unders being juiced up to minus 115 on the money line. Now, the forecast in this game, you got 85 degrees as the temperature, 5-mile-per-hour winds, nothing blowing in from right field. The Cubs have been one of the best under teams this season, 51-38 games to the under. The Cardinals are 46-42 to the under. The under is 24-18 at Busch Stadium so far this season. So in this particular game, the pros are on the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, once again, just to recap the 3 games we talked about today, you have the Mets against the Reds. That game will be starting shortly. The pros are on the New York Mets in that game. Around 8 o'clock tonight, the Twins and the White Sox, not only the pros, but also the general public, they're all on that fast-moving Chicago White Sox train. Also around 8 o'clock, that other team in Chicago, the Cubbies, playing the St. Louis Cardinals, but they're in St. Louis. And, of course, right there, the pros are on the Cardinals in that game as well as on the under. Now, the first two games, the pros are on the over in those two games. They're on the under in this one. So that's the story on the three games on tap for today. Try to get that Mets game in for you so that if you want to go out there and bet that particular game, whether you're for the Mets or against the Mets, whichever way you want to go, but at least we want to let you know how the pros look at that particular game. So we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at some data, some analysis that we kind of came up with, trying to help you out in your handicapping skills, trying to figure out who to bet on. Again, like always, we give you the information and then we leave it up to you to decide how you want to go. So that's the story there. Let's take that final break. And like I said, we will be back in 1 minute. And welcome back. Welcome back to the Sports Wagering Zone. I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you very much for listening. We're coming to you live on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as podcasting on most of your podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, you name it. We're on most of them as well. And I just want you to know we totally appreciate you listening to the show as it goes. So we're talking baseball because the NBA is done. They're finished. They're all done. Milwaukee is now has the championship for this past season. So now things will start getting together, festering. Some numbers will start coming out soon as to who the houses seem to think are going to be the favorites coming into the season that will be coming up soon. Of course, this year that's going to be starting somewhere around Christmas. So we'll try to get ready at that point in time. But we got baseball now. In about less than 2 months, we're going to have the NFL. We're going to have college football starting up, college basketball. We're going to have a full plethora of betting situations in the very, very near future. But right now, it's baseball. And although we're halfway through the season, there's still some value to be looked at. So we went over some of the data that we had. We went over some of the things we talked about before the season started. So let's just kind of look back. Let's see what we talked about then, and let's see how we did, whether we're right or wrong or whatever. But you know what? The big topic, if you remember, when we first started talking about baseball, was the deadening of the baseballs. That was the big news of the day. They're going to deaden the baseballs. And we talked to our listeners. We said, don't automatically assume that there should be a lot of unders because of this, okay? And through the All-Star break, the overs actually have a slight lead. They're at 655 to 639, which is just a smidgen over 50% at 50.5%. Because the odds makers, they're always making adjustments. So they've made adjustments and they made changes because of what was happening with the ball, okay? And in addition to that, since around middle of June, the umpires have been really cracking down on those illegal substances that the pitchers have been using. So with all that coming into consideration, you can understand why the changes have occurred. So let's take a quick look and see at some of the division races. We're going to deal with the National League today. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the American League. In the National League West, we talked about betting on the Padres and on their over. Their over total was 93 and a half wins. We also thought that the Padres really had to make a chance to get and win the West at plus 245 to win that Western NL West, at plus 400 to win the National League, and at plus 850 to win the World Series. That was our thinking back then. Of course, very few of us expected the Giants to be leading the division at the break. Now, 2 games ahead of the Dodgers, and they're 6 games ahead of the Padres. They have really been the surprise team in the National League West. The Giants have been the biggest moneymaker for bettors at plus 20 units through the first half. By that, we mean whatever unit number you're using to bet. If you were betting on the Giants throughout the first half of the season, you'd be up by 20 units. If you bet $100, you'd be up $2,000. If you bet $1,000, you'd be up $20,000. I got to give you put into perspective as to what those units are, but you know what your units are, so kind of put that into perspective as well. Now, I wouldn't bet against the Giants often, especially in individual games. That plus 20 unit was built on a lot of plus prices as dogs, and they were short favorite prices on the money line as well, and they're going to be laying a lot more juice coming into the second half. So be careful if you're looking at betting at the Giants. If you've been doing very, very well so far with them, kind of sit back and relax, think about it, because they really went over their head in the first half, so keep an eye on them. Be very careful if you're betting with them this rest of the season. Meanwhile, in the Central Division, the Cubs, we talked about using them as an over. Their number was 78 wins, okay? And I'm pretty confident that they're going to get there because they were 44 and 46 after the break, so they're pretty close, well over halfway there. Now, I'm not as confident, however, in them getting back into the division race along with the Brewers and the Reds, but that's the story there. Now, my over 84 recommendation on the Brewers looks even more solid, and I expect them to be the only playoff team to come out of the National League Central. That's the Brewers. In fact, while all the attention seems to be on the National League West and, of course, the Mets in the East, the Brewers, they really look like the best National League value right now at 7-1 odds. Now, in the East, I had no clue in this division, okay? It's in wide open. The Mets have a 3.5 game lead over the Phillies at the break. The Braves are a half game back, okay? And the minus 375 division price on the Mets is a little too steep to bet. But I'm not sure it's worth it because the Phillies at 6-1 look pretty decent, or the Braves without Ronald Acuna Jr. are still good at 14-1. So in the East, again, you got to lay some juice if you like the Mets. They went into the second half being 3.5 game lead over the Phillies, and of course they're also a half a game back, another half game back behind the Braves. So that's kind of a little roundup, kind of looking at some value that you could probably be thinking about as far as this season starts coming back into play now. And of course, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about baseball, giving you all the particular data and stats that we can come up with. And just to answer another email, we will be coming back and doing the trends, whether they're winning trends or losing trends. We started doing that before we went on our little break. We did it for about a month and a half, kind of kept an eye on how spreads were going and how the trends were going, especially whether they were winning trends or whether they were losing trends, how to deal with some of them. And we'll go back into explaining all that as well in the next few days as we get all our stats together as to any trends that may be available at the time. So that's the story for today. Once again, let's go over those 3 games we talked about that are on tap for today. Very shortly, you're going to have the Mets playing the Reds in Cincinnati. In that particular game, the pros are on the Mets. The Twins and the White Sox, everybody is on that White Sox fast train. Not only the pros, but also the general public as well. And in the game tonight, the Cubs and the Cardinals, was a toss-up in some places. The pros are on the Cardinals in that particular game. So that's the story there. It's Wednesday. We kind of refer to Wednesday as hump day. It's the middle of the week. I hope you have been having a pleasant Wednesday. I know for some of you, it's just starting out in the morning. Some of you have already been halfway through the day. And if you're listening to the show later on in the day, because it's you're listening to one of the podcasts, we wish you a happy Wednesday, whatever's left of it for you. And of course, if you're going to be doing any betting tonight or this afternoon, by all means, we hope you do very, very well. We want you to have a profitable Wednesday as well as having a pleasant one. And of course, if you are having a profitable day, more than likely, you're going to have a pleasant day as well. Okay. Anyway, that's the story. Once again, we're here every day, Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Time on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network and podcasting on most of your major podcast platforms as well. So until tomorrow at 12 noon, I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you very much for listening. Mets in the early game, that's who the pros are on. Everybody's on the White Sox in the late game, and the pros are on the Cardinals in that late game as well. So until tomorrow, have a very pleasant and hopefully a very profitable Wednesday. We'll be back again tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Time. Goodbye, everybody.